brothers. Ryan Schwartz here with Eric Amen. Welcome to Around the Fire. This is episode number 4 on the audacity of male empowerment. And this conversation is about the very fact that the idea or the notion of empowering oneself may be perceived or experienced as audacious or triggering or embarrassing or shameful or untimely or unsightly or any of the other contractive energies that may be impeding your desire and your drive to quote unquote do the work and pursue the pinnacle of who and what you might be as a man in the world. So with that, I am in, and I hand it over to Eric to officially light this fire and settle us in.
Right. Thank you, Ryan, and thank you, men, for joining us. I would invite you in this moment, if you're not already somewhere private where you can enjoy a moment of stillness, go ahead and pause this and get there. For all of you who are already in that space, you can close your eyes. And just take a moment to use your breath as an instrument to bring your awareness into your body, breathing in through the nose, down into the belly. Bringing more and more of your awareness into your body with each inhale. Becoming aware of your body's reaction to this week's topic. Noticing where you feel more tension in your body, where you feel more stress. And with each exhale, just allow yourself to release tension, release stress. As you release tension and stress in your body, your body begins to become more available to the movement of energy through your body. And as you become more present in this sacred space we are creating, we want to surround our space with energetic protection, keeping out anything and everything not in alignment with the highest and best good of both Ryan and myself, and each listener listening to this in the future. We also ask that all hardware devices, all storage devices, all means of communication, both digital, etheric, mental, spiritual, physical, all be encrypted so that we can enjoy the sanctity and sovereign nature of this conversation inside of our sacred space. As we bring in that safety and protection, I invite you to begin to soften your body to the truth of this discussion around the fire. And as you do, we want to take a moment to honor all the ancestors who have gone before us, all the descendants who will come after, the directions of the north, south, east, and west, Father Sky and Mother Earth, the divine spark within and without. We also honor all of the wisdom keepers, the lineage holders, the teachers, the guides, the sages, all those who support the highest and best good of each man listening to this private podcast, as well as Ryan and myself. We bow to you and thank you for your support. And at this time, men, I invite you to go within your mind's eye and connect with this fire in front of you. See the flickering of the flames as if you were around the fire with other men, the way men used to sit around the fire. And as you gaze into the flames, allow the flickering of those flames to attune you to the truth of your body, the truth of your soul, and your deepest truth. Allow that to become more conscious for you as we prepare to have this conversation. And as you feel connected to your body, you feel grounded in your body, you feel rooted in your body, you can open your eyes as we prepare to begin.
Thank you, Eric.
Mm.
So it's worth declaring right out of the gates, right, that men's work, right, the work that we are doing here, the work that you are participating in simply around sitting by the fire, is quite unapologetically focused on empowering you as a man. That is our reason for being here. That is our reason for gathering. That is our reason for creating space where we can be witnessed, expressed, and held to the highest standard of our truth and who we are striving to become as men. And I believe this to be a rich, a beautiful, and a powerful idea that is ultimately of service to all those around us. And the focus of simply honoring who we are and who we strive to be is reason enough to gather, at least at the beginning, at least as a solution to a cry within that says, I can no longer tolerate the gnawing agony of selling myself short on who I may be and who I may become. And to me, in that spirit, empowerment is a sacred and a beautiful process. Yet the idea of it and how that may be applied to things that are, quite frankly, disempowering, make the notion of a man empowering himself to be uncomfortable, to be triggering, and thus makes it difficult for a man to claim that as a desire. And I'd love to open up this conversation in your experience in witnessing that in the men you have led through groups, and just even in your own experience being a man on the path of self-mastery and self-actualization.
Yeah, that's a beautiful place to start. And I think what is powerful to acknowledge is what you acknowledged right up front. The men's work is empowerment work for men, right? Empowerment work does not inherently mean to empower myself, I will abandon everything else. Nobody is suggesting any sort of abandonment of duty within your family, within your marriage, within your community, or within the world. It simply is to acknowledge that there is this potential, and you fulfilling that potential is in the greatest service to humanity. That is the greatest gift that we can each give to humanity. And I think it's worth noting some of the reasons why that can be challenging for men. You know, right off the bat, we can acknowledge that historically, over thousands of years, women have not been lifted up. They have not been treated as equals. They have not been celebrated as equals. In fact, they have been suppressed in many ways. Their progress and their ability to fulfill their highest potential was impacted by men seeking power over others, by shadowy, toxic, domineering energy, right? And so we get to where we are today, and some of us may have even witnessed that from our fathers, our grandfathers, in our communities. And so when we decide how we want to show up in the world, we're carrying this awareness, this collective awareness, and sometimes it's very conscious and sometimes it's unconscious, that men have done wrong to women. And so when it comes to work on ourselves and become more empowered, it can be easy to misperceive what we're doing in that process. It can be easy to fall into the trap of, do I deserve to be more powerful as a man? Is it my turn? Is it the women's turn? That's a phrase that gets thrown around like it's our turn, right? That is not a way to build a powerful community and society, taking turns.
Mm-hmm.
A way to build a powerful society is where everybody's focused on fulfilling their highest potential, and while also holding space for everyone else without constricting anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody needs to constrict anybody else to fulfill their highest potential.
Right. I feel treating empowerment as a zero-sum game is where we get into so much issue, right? Because there's always going to be that inevitable counterpunch of, now it's my turn. Mm-hmm. What about us, right? And this is where I would invite us to ground this conversation in the individual experience, because I feel like it's very difficult, if not impossible, to talk about empowerment on a macro level for a specific group or orientation of people, right? When empowerment in of itself occurs, first and foremost on an individual personal level, right? It is the process of shedding layers of mistruth within yourself, of beliefs within oneself. It is the process of healing oneself, right? Of their shadows, of their traumas, of the pain and suffering they have incurred. And it is a process of growing in confidence and capacity to excel in the most aligned, purposeful, meaningful, and ideally heart-centered ways as well. So to make empowerment something that extends beyond one's individual pursuit, commitment, and responsibility to self-empower is to get into something that becomes intellectual, ideological, and ultimately ineffective of initiating the root transformation which we are all most responsible and most capable of initiating within ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's right on the money. And if we dive into that individual sense, looking at you right now, and maybe this would be a good thing right now to feel into, to get a temperature check of where you are in relation to this topic right now. If you imagine yourself focusing on your own empowerment, your own fulfillment of your potential, are there parts of you that are constricting that visualization, that energy? Are there any pieces where you go into guilt or shame? Are there any pieces where you feel, yeah, but what about them? Yeah, but they had it a lot worse than I have it. My trauma is not as bad as their trauma. Look at what they've been dealing with. All of these things are great pieces of awareness, and they are not at all a reason to dim your own potential. And often, men with good intentions avoid the deepest work and avoid fulfilling their potential in the name of lifting up somebody else. And it goes against empowerment. one of the things that when we are stepping into empowerment, is we're stepping out of victimhood. And when we are allowing society and the collective out there to influence how bright we get, how tall we stand, how much dignity we hold within us, or when it's okay for us to do the work, when we allow that dynamic to exist within us, we are essentially a victim to the community, to society, to our family. And that, from that place, that's the energetic transmission we're putting into the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's not one of confidence.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of lacking worth.
Right. Right. In many ways, it is my view that empowerment is a reclamation, but it's not a reclamation from others. It's not a reclamation from this group that has more power and I have to reclaim mine from them. It is a reclamation first and foremost from your own inner victim who believes you to be unworthy, incapable of achieving and ascending into a life that is empowered. On the contrary, right, when you fall victim to that and you remain in that victim stance perpetually, that can only eventually lead to a more violent rebellion, right? In the feeling of having been neglected, and now it is my time, and I am going to take this back. I'm going to take my power back from them, right? And thus cycles persist. Every punch results in a counter punch, and we just keep betraying ourselves and each other in this false game of empowerment, right? Rather than claiming responsibility for our own reclamation from our own inner victim with the knowledge of our innate goodness, right? And what can and will inevitably spring from a place of empowering that which is good, that which desires to do good, and to trust. Ultimately, I equate it to that of the sheathed swordsman, right? The one who doesn't trust the power of his own swing, who is so afraid of doing harm, so afraid of enacting any form of action in this world that may not be perceived as good, right? That he sheaths that gift, right? And ultimately is ineffectual, right? The world does not need ineffectual humans, right? And empowerment, self-empowerment, is where you grow in your capacity to be effective, right? To be of service, which is the irony of the whole thing. I want to ground this in something very relatable, especially for, fathers with young families, right? Who tend to, within the initiation of becoming a father, start feeling this impulse towards growth, right? Shit gets real, right? The moment you become a father, the moment you cross that chasm and embrace that role and that duty, the work takes on a whole other level. Even if you've been involved in men's work prior, even if you've been on a path of personal growth, in whatever forms that's taken, it gets ramped up. And it becomes of an even higher urgency and necessity and responsibility to self-empower, and also a very confusing terrain in which to do it, given one's sensitivity and awareness for a more complex ecosystem, right? With your partner, with your child, with your children. And this often, in my experience, personal experience and observed experience, will result in a trepidation in the audacity of claiming that work, right? So you may desire to join a men's circle or go on a retreat or go on an initiatory experience or a plant medicine ceremony or whatever it looks like for you. And rather than honoring the innate impulse towards self-empowerment and self-healing and growth, we justify and contort and distort that intention with claims of, I want to do this for us so I could be a better partner, so I could be a more compassionate and present father, so I could do this, so I could do that. And there is a beauty within that and a validity in that, and it is absolutely part of our core intention to be those things and to serve others through it, and to neglect the very, very root of that fire that is being lit, that core aspect of the flame, which is, I wish to be the fullest version of myself. I wish to attain my fullest potential. I wish to be unceasing in my drive towards the highest level of growth possible for me in this life. To neglect that element, shove that aside, and make it all about singularly serving everyone else, in my view, has a sense of disingenuousness to it, right? Where you are not being honest with yourself, where you are smalling and distorting to hide behind what you really want. And there's an act of self-betrayal within that, right? And self-betrayal rarely ends well. There is a lot of projection that will come through that. There is a lot of mistrust you will have in your own word, in your own intention, when you know you're not being fully honest. So I'd love for you to give some voice to that, Eric, and your experience of the fear in claiming the work for your core desire to self-ascend, to grow, right? Rather than justifying it in the myriad of ways that we tend to do.
Yeah, this is an area we see frequently, working with men is, and often what I'll say to begin with, that man who says, I'm going to do it for them or for this, and is afraid to state or own the truth, is that he actually desires to fulfill his potential, to become who he could be. The self-betrayal of that, the part of you who can't own that, who needs it to be about somebody else, that's the part that gets value from other people through service to others and equates his own value to feedback from the world. And so often, energetically in those situations, there's a lack of worth. There's some sort of belief that that man isn't just inherently worthy of doing that retreat or joining the circle or doing any of those things. And that it would only be okay if it were in service to his family, to his wife, to the community. This is the same thing we see when we see, speakers and authors and men's work teachers say, hey, I have this great message, and I want to first acknowledge these 10 different points about how men haven't shown up for women. Yes, that can be true. That is true. And we can acknowledge that. And when you choose to put it up front, on the front end of men's work, there is an implication inherent to that the work that you would be doing isn't valuable enough on its own unless everybody else gets something out of it. And so going into doing the work from that energetic foundation of I'm not worthy enough on my own, is going to just continue to pave over the deepest available transformation, which is your core beliefs about your own worth, your own acceptance, your own love for yourself.
Right.
And as long as that man keeps needing something from everybody else, love, attention, respect, worth, and isn't able to self-source that, there's going to continue to be violence and discordance and a lack of power and uniting power between men and women.
Mm-hmm. The work of growth and healing and initiation is so big in of itself, right? Is such a courageous undertaking, right? That to add these other layers within it, right? These disclaimers before you could get into it. I'm doing it and all of this, in my view, creates unnecessary delay and robs a man of that innate thrust and power to just go through it, right? To have to sort through the permissibility to even engage in the work is a burden that so few actually can overcome in even getting to the work, in even getting to the fire, right? And you could look at this in the microcosm. If a man chooses to justify his desire to sit by the fire, right, to join his brothers for even an evening, and there's an hour of self-justifying negotiation around it, right? This is good for this. I acknowledge all this. I acknowledge that. Trust, like in that self-justifying whimper, he'll never get to that fire, right? And it's not to say that there is an invalidity, right? And it's not to negate any of those other elements being true and valid and requiring cooperation. And to sit by the fire is tremendous work in of itself that has the innate value. This was exemplified and part of this conversation stirred up. And I'll read it very quickly. So there's a tremendous book in this space. At least I found a lot of value from it. It's called Under Saturn's Shadow, The Wounding and Healing of Men by James Hollis, Dr. James Hollis. And I found this book to be extremely illuminating, right, in piercing through some of the more subtle shadows that operate under the surface. And when I went on his website to look at his other works, his other lectures, I was surprised to find how he described the book right on his site. And I'll read it quickly. In focusing on men's issues, it is not my intention to minimize the wounds of women. We of the male gender owe a deep debt of gratitude to those women who have spoken out, not only to express their own pain with our sexist culture, but also to free men to be more fully themselves. Their battle cry has helped men look more consciously to their own wounding, and we are all better served as a result. The example of women struggling to free themselves from the shadows of the collective gives courage and makes it necessary for men to do likewise. Unless men can emerge from darkness, we shall continue to wound women and each other, and the world can never be a safe or healthy place. The work we do then is not only for ourselves, but also for those around us. Now, there's nothing untrue or invalid about integrating or including those messages. But for an audience of men, this is meant to serve this book, who are deep in their suffering and looking for this glimmer of courage to embark on this dark, sticky, spiky path. Can they endure that extra burden of consideration, or do they simply need to say, or hear someone say, brother, I see what is arising. Let's sit by the fire and give light to it. In the simplicity of that alone.
Yeah, there's this intellectual introspection that paragraph you read requires a man to consider, and most likely brings him into a place of confusion on how much of that is his to carry.
Right.
Like how that affects him and his ability to go in and do this work. What's the intention of the author who wrote this book for men to become more empowered and to heal? In putting that right there, was it the author's feeling that it wasn't okay for him to do the book or publish or to share the book without the acknowledgement of how men's work has in the past failed, and the pressure is really on, right? Because the way I hear that, again, not in any type of false way, but more of a way of like, there's this negative responsibility, or it's like a responsibility to fix society by doing the work, which is exactly what we've been talking about is, okay, there's this suggestion that you should do the work to fix society versus you should do the work, become the best version of yourself. And we know naturally the consequence of that is a more harmonious, loving society. And it's so seldom portrayed that way because of all of the suppressed anger, fear, emotions that have built up over millennia, right? Built up over such a long time. Now it's coming out in a very piercing type of way of like, you need to do this. If you want to be any kind of respectful, man, and you care about women at all, you need to do this because it's your duty, right? That lands differently than how can we support you in doing the work you need to do so that our world can be a better place.
Right. That's so valuable, right? Ultimately, we are of support and in support of one another, right? And allyship is innate in an awakened heart, right? Who wishes to ease the burden and suffering of others. And, right, when you are first really called to this work, it is usually because of some gnawing, unignorable agony within. There is a cry, there is a howl, there is a primal scream that will no longer be suppressed. There is a primal urgency to getting by the fire and doing the work. And there is very little space for that extra intellectual consideration that delays what must be done, the urgency of stepping into that container. And I feel like it is so important to self-check, right, around what is truly calling you to this work. Is it this thrust towards achieving your potential and healing what can be healed and the rightness and sacredness of that? Or is it masked in this cascade of fear, of smalling, of shaming, self-shaming, and self-betraying, and trying to consider all of that on the periphery before you even get to the core of what it is you're doing? It's my belief that any man called to this container and this podcast and listening in right here has done considerable work and self-reflection, right? Otherwise, it is very unlikely you would have resonated with the content that has led you here. It is my strong belief that there is an innate goodness and sincerity and desire to be the best man you can be, not only for yourself, but for your children, your children's children, their children, 7 generations deep, your partner, to be in service of her incredible initiation into womanhood or whatever phase of life she is in. All these intentions are so rich and so beautiful. And I would also invite you to get to the core intention, which is your own empowerment, your own healing, and your own growth.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a really powerful spiritual model of this in so many different wisdom traditions and lineages, actually. And we can look at something like the Bodhisattva, who is able to attain nirvana. They're able to attain enlightenment and ascend, and then they choose to stay and help others. But because I know so many of the men listening to this, as you said, Ryan, are just men with these beautiful big hearts. They're wanting to serve the world, and it's easy to, in service of the world, to have blind spots in where we are first serving the world at the betrayal of ourselves, right? At the in martyrdom of ourselves. And so the Bodhisattva is able to reach enlightenment because of the focus of their own growth. We can look at Yeshua or the Christ and the way in which they got themselves to a place of enlightenment and then helped others, right? They didn't forego their own growth. They didn't shy away from their own, mystery school initiations. They didn't put all of that on hold so they could focus everywhere but themselves.
Right.
They were able to be of immense, great service to humanity because of what they've cultivated within themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that frame is so important to anchor into if you really want to be of service to humanity.
Mm-hmm.
Focus on cultivating that which serves humanity.
Right. And focus on your immediate environment, right? You are not in a race to the bottom with your family, right?
Mm-hmm.
You are all in a process of healing, growth, and ascension.
Mm.
And to lead, to inspire that, is to pursue the fullness of which you can in your own empowerment, right? And encourage and inspire that to the best of your capability and capacity in those around you. But the starting point can't be one of shame or selfishness. And this is the shadow that so many fall into, right? The audacity to pursue this growth, right? The audacity to do this work while my partner is still in her thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
The audacity to want to be more peaceful and powerful in a world that is very far from peaceful,
Mm-hmm.
right? Audacity isn't what the experience requires. It is so innate and so sacred and so true to what it means to be human, to be in a body, to have the gift and the call and the sensitivity to answer that call towards attainment and actualization as you define it and as you experience it. So what is perceived and maybe previously believed to be audacious, in my view, is what simply is one of the very core reasons we are here. And how can that be anything other than sacred, then necessary, right? And then something we are so innately responsible to participate in to the fullest of our abilities.
Yeah. And what would you say, Ryan, is something a man could do right now to, maybe he's becoming aware through this conversation of where he has some shadow around the way he relates to empowerment for men, or the way he relates to women's empowerment, or just the collective in general? What are some things that man can do right now?
I feel primarily trusting your goodness, right? Trusting your innate goodness. Next would be to fully own your desire and your call towards the work you are called to do, right? Without it needing to have a disclaimer without it needing to be justified. When you share a desire, right, whether that is, I wish to sit with my brothers around the fire, or I wish to begin a new fitness routine and I want to be in a strong body, to own that as a one sentence thing. And when you're sharing it, let that hang. Resist the urge to go, because of this and this and this and this and this. And I want to be, fit when I'm 45 so I can run up the hills with our children. And just stop at claiming and owning the thing that is being called, right? So that is a practice I would encourage. And it may feel clumsy. And I say that as we have crying child.
It's perfect.
It is so perfect.
Yeah.
Who am I to record a podcast when? But that's what I would encourage, right? To own that desire for the beauty, the innate beauty it has, and the innate necessity it has. And to be mindful of tuning in and sensing where you are falling into your own shame around pursuing it, your own justification around pursuing it, and simply observe that and trace those back to the roots as far down as you can perceive them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would add in to that, when you become aware of those places and you trace those down to the roots, ask yourself the simple question, is this in the highest service to myself, my family, and humanity? Most likely it won't be when you become aware of those places. So yeah, I think that's a really powerful practice for men to sit with and reflect upon.
Beautiful. Well, we are here to support what has arisen. And whether you choose to continue being in dialogue with us through, through the means provided or through the Sacred Men's Council, it is my intention and wish for you as a listener that your own reclamation can be a powerful one, a clean one, a non-violent one, and one that is ultimately you reclaiming you from the parts of yourself that have withheld or impeded that progress. It is my wish and desire for you that you participate in that reclamation before it metastasizes into the illusion that you need to rebel against some form of imagined captor or suppressor in your life. That is the messiness we are here to, by all means available to us, help you sidestep, right? There is tremendous amount of suffering in the world that is caused by reckless and ruthless and confused reclamations of power. And if you can walk away from this episode simply trusting the goodness in your own heart and the purity in your intention to reclaim power from the parts of you that have suppressed it, I feel like that will be a fruitful starting point.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. You feeling complete?
Yes. Yes, I am.
All right. Let's close us down.
Okay. So, men, come back to a powerful place of stillness within your body. And I invite you now, as you breathe deep into your body, to bring more dignity to your posture. Bring a sense of dignity within you. As a man who is fully entitled to the fulfillment of his highest potential, as a man who was born to fulfill his highest potential. And see if that, combined with your full breath, liberates anything within you. And as you breathe into your body, we ask that with each inhale, your energy field be brought into a calibration that is more appropriate for the next stage of the day. At this time, we dedicate our call today, our session, our podcast, to the upliftment of suffering and confusion for all sentient beings and the amplification of love energy here on Earth. And at this time, we close down our podcast, sealing, guarding, protecting. It is sealed, it is finished, it is done, so it is, and so be it. And now, men, breathing back into your body as you find the ground beneath you and you center in your body, you can open your eyes.